If you are somebody thinking about hiring a fractional CFO and you're considering an exit in the next 12 to 24 months, the first story I talked about where they were going to market, the offer was between 3 to 6. The CFO came in, repositioned them, backdated all the reporting structures for the last few years. Then 9 months and went out on the market and they sold it for 20 million.
Welcome back to the New F Word podcast, where we talk finances in business. I'm your host, Colin Hewitt, founder and CEO at Float. We're so glad to be back for season 3. And this season, we've got some great guests that are going to bring a ton of value. We'll be diving further into how fractional CFOs add value, what financial clarity actually looks like, and what systems and apps are leading the way. New guests, sharper conversations. Let's get into it. All right. It's great to have Peter Turner, the CEO of ConnexionCFO, with us today. Peter, great to have you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
And you're based in London?
Yeah, I am. I'm based in London full time.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, let's get straight into it. I know you have recently started Connection, and you were part of a much larger organization, and you sort of saw a gap in the market. It'd be great to hear about, what you saw and what you're doing differently.
Thanks for the question. I've been involved in the industry for approximately 17 years. I'm a qualified accountant. I've been a CFO myself. I don't normally do fee-based work, but I have got one client, which is where I'm at today. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. I've placed CFOs in over 700 plus scaling businesses over the time. So I've got a reasonable degree of experience. But I see as the industry is evolving, there are some, what I feel are gaps in the marketplace. Most agencies talk about the quality of the CFOs that they've got, and they've got the top 1% of the market. But the reality is the market, the really top CFOs, they don't need an agency to find work. And so I saw that as a gap. And how can I find those types of CFOs and actually provide a remuneration structure that means that they'll come and work for us, so that we can put them into our client base. So there's one gap. The second gap is a lot of agencies talk about how their people engage and collaborate together. But reality is they generally don't, because there's no incentive for them. And again, our equity and our remuneration structure ensures that all of our CFOs really do collaborate. And then the final piece really is just the identifying what is a real differentiator between the CFOs at the very top end and all the others. And I'm quite lucky in that I have met a lot of what I would classify as world-class CFOs. I was actually interviewing one on Sunday, and I always ask them the same question. And the question I say is what differentiates you between everybody else? And they all say, strangely, exactly the same thing. And that's one of the key differentiators is that what really is a world-class CFO, and what really does, what are the outputs and outcomes that they deliver, really.
What's the thing that they say?
So they all say it's the ability to tell the story around the numbers. A lot of businesses bring on board a CFO today because they generally have problems with their numbers, but actually it's a story that's behind those numbers. And I'll give you an example. One of the CFOs went into business, they're trying to sell, they're getting probably an exit price of between 3 to 6 million. And the owners weren't comfortable with that price. So he spent a few months with them. He then re-engineered what he thought were the KPIs, created this story. Then they went through the financials for the last 3 years and restructured how they did all the reporting. So then when they went back out to market, they got offered 15 million, and 9 months later. And there was just really the ability to understand the story, understand the data, and then how you reposition the business for that. And that probably takes you out into a different market in terms of potential buyers.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because obviously, I would always say in our business, like, you only know when you have to go through that where you've hired somebody and they haven't been quite right in order to know what you're looking for in the next hire. So the business is often a journey where you sometimes you get lucky and you hire great people and they grow with the company, but most of the time you're hiring somebody and then you're realizing like, oh, that I can see the limitations, and now we need to hire somebody who can do this differently or improve. And you're out there. But most people probably don't get to hire that many CFOs in their lifetime, so they're either sitting with the same person that they maybe hired, and they don't know what they don't know, and you've like say hired maybe hundreds and have that experience, so you know what you're looking for. And I think that that's a really unique position for you to be in. So yeah, I mean, what what do you look for other than people who can tell a good story? Like, like what are your kind of like, what do you, when you're thinking about bringing somebody on to your group,
Yeah.
what would you say?
I think for me, the real critical is that they had transactional experience. Transactional experience around whether it's M&A, fundraising, exits, internationalization, maybe even IPOs. They have to have that transactional experience, not just once, but 4 times, 5 times. I've got one person who's done over 20 plus exits. They've worn the yellow jersey. The difficult part with that, though, for some businesses is that they want a CFO to be their numbers person, their transactional person. And a lot of these people, CFOs at the very top end, they've said to you, I'm not a CFO anymore. And you ask them the question why, and they'll say, oh, I'm more strategic, more commercial. And then they'll start talking to you about, they'll inside a client, they'll understand the client's market. They'll understand the product innovation. They'll understand, because of product innovation, potential new markets. They understand their pricing structures. What does the business model look like? What does our team have to look like? And as a result of that, then they'll understand the business modeling. Whereas a lot of CFOs, recruiters today, they start with the numbers and slowly build upwards. Reality is you should be starting up here in terms of the vision, the mission, etc. So they're the people that I'm looking for. Really.
Yeah, and I guess it's a hard, one of the things that, again, as a founder, like when I work with a coach, it's like staying at the vision level sometimes puts you into that uncomfortable place of going, if there's like, I'm not sure how we're going to get there. Like we've got a vision, but the mind kind of comes in and says, well, how on earth are you going to get there? Like the practicality. And I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it? And the CFO's got to bridge that gap in a way between a vision of what's possible and a reality that they can just show on paper.
Yeah, interesting enough is I think it's often about bringing the business back to its basics. So where I'm doing a CFO role at the moment, they were probably overstaffed, and that puts a lot of pressure on you as a business founder, doesn't it? So we've reduced the staff levels by half. Ironically, it's meant that the business has become more focused on its existing clients and new potential clients. And the uplift, I think that we'll finish the year at about 2.6 million in revenues. Next year, I could easily see us doing 5 to 7 million.
And, obviously other CFO firms are going to say, well, we only hire the best CFOs too. So what else is different about the model that you guys are building?
I mean, the reality is, and I don't think there's an agency out there that can say that they have the very top, because the very top people, they're run all the time by VCs, PEs, houses, etc. So, and I'm quite open about our business model is we pay out our team between 70 to 85%, depending whether it's fee-based earnings or success-based earnings. And of the portion that we keep, we put a third of that into a cash fund, and we use that cash fund to invest solely into our client base. And then that fund is actually owned 20% by myself and 80% by the CFOs. And so the great thing about that is in 5 years' time, we might have invested in 20 to 30 businesses. And as they exit, the CFOs that we have in our team, they all get a portion of that. So it means that they're completely engaged, B, the collaborative. I was talking to a large VC firm about 4 months ago, and they were actually saying, we decided to stop using fractional CFOs primarily because we didn't get any of the advantages out of collaboration. And we noticed that most of those fractional CFOs, after 6 months, the engagement just started to die because they'd done the R&D claim, they'd done the fixed the reporting, etc. But the structure that you've got, we totally understand why everybody would be engaged, because it's actually in every CFO's interest for everybody else's clients to be successful, because they get the equity upside because it's shared.
Yes. No, I think that's so unique. I've never heard of that before. Is anybody else doing that you know of, or that's
No, they're not. I think it's because I don't know why, but one of the things I saw from where I worked previously is it's almost as though they were capping what the CFOs could earn, and I didn't want that, because at the end of the day, once you place a CFO inside a client, I always felt as though we had two clients. The CFO was a client and the client is a client. And how can you, if you really want the best, you have to reward them. And I think the agency model to some extent restricts the quality of the CFOs that they do bring. And I'm not saying all CFOs are poor. I'm just saying there is a set at the very top that are just outstanding.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting, very compelling, both as a potential customer of looking for that, and also I imagine as a CFO who wants to come and work with you guys because they're getting to it's a high bar, and then on top of that they're getting the equity share, and they're getting that sense of buy-in, which I imagine you don't get in other places.
Yeah, I mean, hand on heart and being honest and open, I took 7, top class CFOs out for having a small bite and a drink. And when I asked them about what type of business model, and one of them just said, well, over the years, I might have worked for 5 businesses. One's been successful and the other 4 haven't. What would be great is if the 7 of us all put our equity pots together and we shared. And that's essentially, there's them who designed the concept, and I just brought it to life, really.
Yeah. Makes sense, because again, it's hard for them to know which ones are going to be successful. There's a lot of like the VC model, isn't it? There's 1 out of 10 will do well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The other interesting aspect about people at the very top end is they're seriously well connected. So if you're wanting to do a fundraise or wanting to do an exit, or you're looking to move into the States and you're looking for tax efficiencies, or where do you base yourself? They've got some very serious contacts because they've been developing those contacts over 20, 30 years.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So how many CFOs do you have working with you at the moment?
I've got 12 at the moment. I'm not, my business model isn't about having 500 clients and 300 CFOs. It's very much about having a small team of highly skilled CFOs. And I might be restricted by how many clients I can bring on board, because it's all about how many of those top end CFOs I can bring into the mix. That's my core focus. That's my growth limiter, if you could call it that.
Yeah. And do you bring in other sort of like financial controllers or bookkeepers, or how do you handle that side of things?
I think that's a really great question, because I think you have to, because today I think if you're looking at a finance function, it's all about a team. It's not about one person. And these people, they don't want to be doing the month-end accounts, the management accounts, and probably do the board pack. They're happy to interpret and tell the story and then draw the pictures, but they don't necessarily want to be doing it. And reality is, you can get somebody for, I don't know, 500 to 800 a day is going to be so much faster in terms of, and a much lower cost base in terms of putting together your report pack than using a CFO.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. You do not want to be paying CFO rates for this sort of bookkeeper level operations, which are hugely important, and I just needs to exist for everybody to do their job. So,
and one of the downsides I see developing in the fractional CFO market, anyway, I don't know about other C-suites, is that some of the CFOs need money, so they'll do anything really. They might do the management accounts, they might do HR, they might do IT, they might do legal. They really shouldn't be doing that.
And how do you select which businesses you work with? And do you have people that come to you and you'll reject some that you don't think are right, or how does that work?
The core criteria very much is we only work with ambitious founders and CEOs. So, you might be pre-revenue, but you're hyper ambitious, you've raised some money, and we look at your business and think, you know what, if we were a VC, that's investable. So we're happy to put somebody into that business. You might be turning over 10 million and have turned over 10 million for the last 5 years and not really interested in too much growth. You're probably not a client for us. You might have grown from 5 million to 20 million and looking for an exit period. Again, it's the key determination for us as founders and CEOs, ambitious, because that drives growth, that drives complexity, drives scale. And it's and they understand that scale piece as well, which is great.
Yeah. And is there like a minimum buy-in from the business in terms of number of days or cost, or how does that, is it completely flexible? How does it typically work?
The minimum buy-in for us is 2 days a month. It's hard to do a lot more than only 1 day a month, really.
And how often do the team get together? Or do you gather, is it on Teams, or is it like, do you get together in person every so often, or is it, do they connect?
We don't. I mean, there's only 12 of us, and we're all reasonable. We know each other, and we're all reasonable friends. So we don't have any formality around our meetings. It's just not the way they want to operate. So it's not as it's not like they all going to work in the same place together. So, but we do. I also run a non-exec directors club, and there's about 50 members in that, and we have drinks and nibbles, and all the CFOs come to that. So we do get together every two months, and that's an opportunity for them to mingle, potentially with clients, potentially with non-execs.
That sounds great. Yeah, I mean, and where you're in actually today, you're saying you're in a client today, stepping in, taking some of the CFO role. Is that common for you, or is that unusual?
That is unusual for me. As I say, I'm a qualified accountant. I've been a CFO. I started my own technology company in 2015, which we sold to Experian in 21. And I don't generally do fee-based work. I have put 2 CFOs into this particular business previously. And the founder has, very strong ADHD. And I think the CFO's really struggled with that because the way he thinks, he is hyper creative, an absolute genius. Because I have ADHD, I'm as much an ADHD coach as I am a CFO, and I can tell a story in the way that he wants the story to be seen, really. So I would, at the start of the year, this business was probably close to not being able to survive, but today it's into that thriving mode. So, and we'll probably exit in the next 3 to 5 years, would be my guess. But again, it's for me, I've taken everything back to basics. So we don't obviously we do a cash flow. We don't do a P&L because he just can't read a P&L. So we do a P&L consolidated cash flow together, which some of it's cash, some of it's P&L. Ultimately, what he's really just interested in is what's in his bank account, really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that was kind of where I came at Floke from, is like looking at trying to find a model. And I guess came to the same conclusion, which is the P&L is interesting, but if you can kind of do the combination where you've got, that, I guess, direct method where it's almost like a P&L in terms of a lot of things essentially work that way. And then you've got cash, but you can get right down to the detail of when is that cash coming in. It stops having to be a 3-way model. You can actually create this sort of nice hybrid, which I think for me, that works really well too. I suspect there's lots of other people that are like that. You don't want to have to get into that managing everything in multiple tabs and.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what's really interesting is he's really strong on the balance sheet, and not a lot of founders really are strong on balance sheet. They're strong in P&L, and then if the balance sheet gets out of sync and out and a mess, it's awful. But a good thing is he is really strong on the balance sheet, which is quite nice. And we really do make sure every cost we're spending is it delivering something. So we've reduced our cost base by half in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of the ADHD side of things, like you say, you're almost coaching people in that through your own experience. Like, what sort of things are you typically bringing? Because I'm sure there's lots of people that are working with. I mean, it's so common now with the ADHD. It's like, yeah.
So I think the thing. And this is from my perspective, is people with ADHD, I call them glitzy things, but upsides and downsides are both glitzy to us. I don't think it's hard to differentiate between the two. So really the key opportunity is to make sure, if you're dealing with somebody who does have ADHD as a founder, make sure that they've got their time spent in that upside more so than the downside. Bear in mind that they can go to the downside so quickly, and they just don't differentiate the two. So how do you create an environment for example, where I'm working, is the environment is, how do I create an environment? Because he is an incredible salesman. So how do I create an environment so he's out spending more time with customers, out spending more time, looking for new business and creating partnerships, etc. And while he doesn't have to worry about his cash and that. So I think that's the important part, really. And structuring their days. People with ADHD do need structure. So when I first started, we had cash flow, probably 4-5 cash flow meetings a day. Now we have one a week. It was on a Wednesday at 3:00, which I missed today. So today it's at 4:30.
Okay. But I better not keep you too long.
But it's very structured. So
yeah. what's your general sense of how businesses are doing at the moment? From my experience, a lot of people are, really trying to find ways back to profitability if they've raised money, or they're, a lot of businesses are struggling out there. Like, what's your experience in terms of the business you're working with?
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses are struggling. I think if you've raised a lot of debt and you're not a good decision maker and you don't have a reasonably strong C-suite team, you're probably in a little bit of trouble right now, would be my guess. Decision making slowed down considerably. However, on the positive side, if you've got the right people, right decisions makers in the business, I think it's probably a reasonably buoyant market, actually. Yeah. I read an article on LinkedIn a few weeks back. I don't know if you read it, and it said 90% of businesses fail because of bad cash management. And yeah, but I slightly disagreed with it. I should have written a note, because I think 90% of businesses fail because of bad management and bad decision making overall. Cash management is just one part of it.
Yeah, it's the sort of excuse or the symptom at the other end. But yeah, it could be. It's not the main reason that the business is completely like amazing and then just happens to have poor cash management at the other end.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so I think those businesses that aren't good at making decisions, they're the ones that are probably struggling at the moment. They might be thinking that business is going to turn around, things will come back. They're not making cuts in terms of cost savings, etc. You do have to look at and with AI, everything's getting is in the process being automated. I think every business should be looking at its business model and saying, what's next and how can we do this? How can we do this better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've obviously worked in a significant amount of businesses. What are you looking for those ones that if you were coming into business, what are the steps you would sort of look at to in terms of helping them make good decisions? Like, is it the management team? Is it the C-suite? Is it like a clear vision? Like, what are the kind of things that you would be typically coming in and setting out your stall in?
For me, there's always three key things for me that I focus in on, and is what is the market opportunity. Some businesses think they've got the market opportunity right, but they don't. So what's the market opportunity? I think then you really always need to look at the product. And then the next piece on that is go to market, and included in the product is pricing structures. How you're doing your pricing. Included in the go to market is how you take your product to market. Are there more efficient ways of doing that? So I don't think any CFO, if they don't understand the market opportunity, the product the business has, and to go to market, they're probably starting in a pretty bad place.
When you say market opportunity, break that down for us. Like, what do you mean by that?
So, for example, if I think about what I do in terms of placing CFOs, or what you do in terms of Float app and how you go to market with that, is what are you go to market channels? Are you going direct? Are you going through on a website? Are you doing partnerships? Are you doing introduction agreements? How are you generating that ultimate pipeline? And it could be just, you could be Google spend or Facebook spend or whatever it is, how you're attracting customers. And then you might, so for example, for me, it's all through introduce agreements and partnerships and relationships with VCs and PE houses. But yours could well be the same but slightly different. Whereas an e-commerce site is more about, it's marketing spend and, they have to be quite tight on cost of acquisition, etc. But then, and at the same time, while you're looking at a market, you really need to be looking at, are there other markets that we can be talking to too? And, market penetration could be through organic growth or could be through acquisitive growth. And if you are doing an acquisition, how are you going to fund that? And have you thought about the integration fees and what, why you're doing it? And if you're doing an acquisition, is it purely for market penetration or is it for product innovation? Again, if you understand your market and it's buying product X, but there's an opportunity to set up product Y, and you've got another organization sitting over here as a startup selling product Y, potentially you could acquire that to get a larger market penetration in your existing business. But you've got to be able to think all of those things through, really.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. A lot of it is about go to market, marketing strategy. And I guess that's not something you typically, you're typically introduced at when you start off in a financial role. Like, do you think the CFOs that you're working with have learned that just through hard-won experience, or how do they get into that? Because
If you're working with ambitious founders, they're going to take you there. You learn through that process. One of the comments I like to make is my personal view is a lot of people recruit a CFO today for the problems and issues that they have in their business today. What they really should do is recruit a CFO for the opportunities that they have in the business, because the problems are relatively easy to fix. But what they do is they recruit somebody who fix the problems, and then they keep that person for probably too long, and it slows them down. And really, you should always look at, if I'm bringing on board a CFO today, what can they do in terms of helping me around the opportunities within the market, my product, my go-to-market strategies, my C-suite team, my systems, et cetera. Local business versus global business, acquisitive versus organic. That's what they should be thinking about when they recruit a CFO, because that person can easily solve all those problems that they have in their business today. So I would say to anybody, always think about the opportunities rather than the problems when you're looking to recruit a CFO.
I think it's interesting. We've just gone through that ourselves. We had a CFO through an agency who was great, like really, really fantastic person, and I really like working with him. And it was kind of great to catch up, and he believed in what we were doing. But I joined another program recently about scaling, like, how to be more ambitious. How are we going to get there? And the big thing they were really pushing is, have you got the advisors that are really going to take you there? They're really driving. And we realized, like, we probably need somebody else who's going to push us through, make it more uncomfortable for us, because that wasn't and it could have been that I didn't give that direction, but my sense was that not everybody wants to push and challenge, and get that sense of, like, how are we going to get beyond just like where we are right now, and really into that next threshold. So yeah, we took on a new CFO recently, and it's a transition, right? It's a bit messy, going back into the messy, sorting out a few things, management, like all that. But actually, what we're getting out of it from a drive and an ambition point is very different.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can talk a little bit about AI for a second, I think you should use. I think that one of the changes in the market is that businesses, if they're not already, should be using chat to identify the finance director or the financial controller or the CFO that they need for their business. And in doing that, you should be positioning yourself. In 5 years' time, I want to be an international business. This is my market today, but I want to extend. And then the chat would write that job description for you, and it will write quite a detailed job description for you. And it might even say to you that, go out and recruit a 35 to 40-year-old rather than a 55-year-old. I've got 3 CFOs, and 35, and 37. They are just phenomenal. Their experiences that they've had is far considerably better than most probably 50 to 60-year-olds, I would have thought. And they're just superb.
Not to say that age is a limiter, though, right?
So the only I'm 60, so I don't think about age as a limiter, but I think it's about relevancy is the thing that limits you. I know people. So my top CFO, he's 56. He's done 75 acquisitions, 35 exits, and raised over $1 billion. And I would put him into any business tomorrow, and he's phenomenal. So I'm not saying that age is a limiter, but the relevancy is.
Yeah. If you were like helping another business and you brought in the CFO, who else would you be looking to make sure that it's not the CFO can't do it all by themselves? Like, what's the other like key roles or roles that you think really drives? Is it COO? Is it the CMO? Like, what have you seen? How many typically like people do you need at that sort of top level?
Well, it's a little bit of a tough one because some of the sector dependent, but I think I would have thought if it's technology, there'd be a CIO or CTO probably would be the next most important thing. It's certainly depending on if you're an e-com business and you're doing the shipments yourself, you're probably looking for a COO pretty quick. You've got to have a revenue officer there.
And what's their role? What would you say the role of the revenue officer is, like, compared to marketing or sales?
Well, I think the role of the revenue officer really is sales. Really, they're managing that go to market piece. The CMO will probably have some contribution in that piece, but the CRO is ultimately responsible for those revenues and partnerships.
And do you have a black book of those folks as well? Like, is that part of your NXD networking side of things, or?
All the non-execs have to have some, and I didn't set it up deliberately like this, but when I first started, I said that they all have to have some type of domain expertise. There are a couple of generalists, because I've got one chap who started and sold 6 businesses, so he deserves to be a generalist. But all the others have got some deep domain expertise, whether it's product or people or innovation. They all have some type of domain expertise.
If there's somebody out there who's skeptical about hiring a fractional CFO, like, what's the most kind of compelling story or example you can think of to, convince them that they're missing out?
Well, I think that the first story where, if you were somebody thinking about hiring a fractional CFO and you're considering an exit in the next 12 to 24 months, the first story I talked about where they were going to market, the offer was between 3 to 6. The CFO came in, repositioned them, backdated all the reporting structures for the last few years. Then 9 months they went out on the market and they got sold it for 20 million. I think that's a pretty compelling reason why you'd probably use a fractional. And the great thing about a fractional, if you're doing an exit, is that that's their core focus. They're not doing the day-to-day stuff. Their core focus is about maximizing your value. If you were looking for growth, and why I would have a fractional versus a full-time, again, I think you're looking for those more commercial strategic areas. So if you're trading at, say, I don't know, 5 million a day, and next year you can get to 6 million, next year 8 million, why aren't you thinking going from 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 or 5 to 20? And I'm going to use my own example. Once, when I first came to England a number of years ago, I started with a company, we're turning over 6 million. And my challenge to them is, why can't we grow to 20 million in the next 12 months? And what it does is it just it forces you to think differently. Because as founders, so often we sit inside our business and think, how do I make this business better? But you do need to spend time outside of the business, and just have some thinking time. And why we didn't hit 20 million, we hit 18 million, but that was a great result. And ultimately, what the biggest change we made inside that business is how people thought what their roles were inside their business, and how they collaborated with each other and how they engaged. That was a secret sauce in that business, but I drove that, even though I was the CFO.
Yeah, that's certainly our journey at the moment. We're trying to 4x our business in the next 12 months. So it's a huge goal. And initially I was really scared about even sharing that with the team, because it's kind of like, how are we going to do that? And even, thinking about sharing it with our CFO, because then the way they're going to go, it's crazy, you're never going to be able to do that. But actually, everybody's rallied around it, and it starts to change the conversations that you have, thinking, well, why would we do that? It's not going to really move the needle. This is the opportunity we need to start looking at. Or
I kind of figure that if you let's just say I don't know what you turn over, let's just say it's 5, and you decided your target's 20. Part and parcel of that is about saying, who do I need to get on board to get this stuff to 20? And don't stop looking for the right people, because ultimately it still comes down to people, and the ability to make decisions for you and help you make decisions and changing those data sets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if are you taking on CFOs at the moment as part of are you looking to hire, or are you kind of like, you've got your full complement? How are you thinking about it?
So no, because we're very sector focused in terms of our CFOs. So I'm always looking for potential CFOs, because they might have a niche about their skill set. Because I do think with AI, we will, the roles of CFOs will become a lot more niche focused going forward. So we're always looking for outstanding CFOs who have that niche space.
Yeah. And in terms of like startups or businesses that are wanting to get in touch, what's the best way for them to approach you?
Just make contact with me direct. My phone number, they ring me on my mobile, which is 078 7 364 982. I'm very happy to have a chat. I'll chat with anybody. I decided to help businesses, and that's why I became an accountant. I realized quite quickly that accountants in their pure form don't necessarily help businesses grow. So that's why I became a CFO, really. So I'm very happy to chat to any business.
Fantastic. I think it's a really exciting model, and I hope that you guys are really successful and get those CFOs, some rewards as well. So,
well, I'm more interested in making sure that our clients are hyper successful, really. So, and if they are, we're successful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, thanks so much. Really, really good to chat to you.
Colin, likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The New F Word. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, expert financial advice shouldn't be limited to those with just big budgets. You can access the same level of advice for a fraction of the costs thanks to this fractional revolution. I believe that every growing business needs to know how much a game changer this can be. So if you loved the episode, please consider subscribing to the show. It'll help us keep doing what we're passionate about, and feel free to share this episode with others who might find it useful. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. See you in the next one.